If I have $100,000 in equity, but it's across multiple properties, how would I access that? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I'll take that. It's really not too difficult, right? You're already connected with JWB as a vertically integrated provider. So we already have all of the information to properly plan for you. So what it would start with is Pablo sitting down with your portfolio manager here at JWB and saying, all right, how can I use the existing equity that's in my portfolio so that I can acquire another property without having to bring any cash out of pocket? And that's a fun conversation, a beautiful conversation. And many times we're able to do that. So it would be that conversation. Pablo, you already know the lending network at JWB that you're a part of and you have access to. So once we put the plan together with your JWB portfolio manager, the portfolio manager just says, okay, let me direct you to the correct lending teammate. That lending teammate already has the plan in place. We say, okay, well, we're going to refinance this property. We're going to do it at this rate. We're going to put this percentage down. And so they're fully informed of the plan ahead of time. And then it's about execution. And, of course, they know our level of service. You're not just a number when it goes to getting a loan for your JWB property or your refinance for a JWB property, same level of customer service and standards. And then we're there to walk you all the way through to the finish line and the closing table. And, in this situation, Pablo, and for many client situations, you're able to just basically start stacking those victories. That's how these things start building on themselves, this compounding effect. It's not like every client comes into an extra $50,000 or $100,000 a year from their active income and they're like, okay, cool, now I'm ready to buy another rental property. No, it's this planning process. It's this ability to access funds either through other investments that have gained equity or through retirement accounts or you name it. We're able to kind of craft that plan so you can continue to stack assets without having to come out of pocket.
Interesting. Paul, anything you want to add to that since I'm just out here asking
Yeah,
for advice from a couple of experts?
I love it. Number one, I'm really excited for you because, like Greg said, that's a really fun conversation to have. And it's a conversation I feel like we have a lot with a lot of our mastery students, a lot of our people on the call, and the not your average investor community because they make good decisions, they invest, and they start to build wealth. And then all of a sudden they look up and they're 2 years in, or 3 years in, or 5 years in, or they have a house that they may have inherited from a family member, or, there's a lot of different situations. This is financial engineering at its best, right? Where we can take a look at what is the equity that you may not realize you had, probably didn't realize you had that 100 grand, and we financially engineer how do we get access to it. And there's a lot of different answers. And Greg talked about probably the primary one, which I love. But I want to tie it back to what we talked about earlier in the show. This is the flywheel. This is the rubber meeting the road on how did the wealthy get wealthier and how is it so much easier for them than it is for me when I got started. This is exactly the answer, right? Things compound. You make good decisions, you start stacking, you analyze what you have, maybe you change where you're investing, make good decisions, and all of a sudden you look up 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in, boom, now we have this conversation. This is the start of Pablo's flywheel, like right now, right? And I guarantee you, Pablo's took 3 years or so. The next conversation we have on this will probably take 1.5 years, right? Because it compounds on itself. And then from there, it takes about 8 months to do it again. Then from there, it takes about 4 months. You see it flywheels, right? And it compounds. This is exactly how we talk about how a path to a portfolio. Perfect example. Okay.
Can we do this show every week, guys? And can I invite my wife? Or continue, Paul.
No, I love it. I love it. A little bit more in the logistics, right?
Yeah.
So logistics, hardcore, nitty-gritty financial education. Paul, if you built $100,000 in equity in this particular case, right?
Mm-hmm.
The logistics of it are is we need to do, and Greg talked about it, that planning call. Well, what's going to happen on that planning call? What are you going to experience? The experience you will have, right? And just like you, and just like me, I love this experience. I love knowing what's going to happen when I jump on, right? Just like you. I'm going to say, okay, here's where I am. Here's rental property number one. Here's the current debt I have on that rental property. I bought it at X. I used to owe Y. I have paid down over the course of 2 or 3 years this amount. So my current outstanding loan, round number, $50,000, right? Just a round number, okay? So that's, you just uncovered, well, here's the equity. It's worth now, I bought it at 100, now it's worth 120. I only owe 50. That's my equity. You with me? Just round numbers. So we need to identify what the equity is, right? And then what JWB will help you do is say, okay, let's make some assumptions. Let's go back to the bank and say, hey, I only owe 50 on this particular asset. It's worth whatever it's worth, 100, 120 in this particular example. How do I get some of that delta? How do I go get it? And the bank will say, well, hey, option number one is let's give you a new loan. When we give you that new loan, that 70%-ish, 60%-ish of that new value, right? And we say, hey, we need to pay down that 50 or so that you had, that other debt that you still have, we have to pay that down. But if we give you a new loan at 60 or 70% of your new value, here's the cash you would receive from that loan. That's the cash out, right? So a cash out refinance really just means pay off the old loan, get a new loan, right? Once you paid off the old loan and you're getting that new loan, whatever's left over in that scenario goes to you, Pablo, right? That's the cash out part of it. Here's the beautiful part of those things. Equity you receive from that, it's not taxed, okay? Consult with your tax professional. I am not a CPA, right? But that's $100,000 that we just created for you, Pablo, right? We talked about that Greg created for you. I don't get credit for that. Greg did that, right? Greg did that, and his team and all his people behind the scenes, and the JWB, the Jacksonville economy. That is tax-free income. You don't pay taxes on those, right? Which is pretty cool, right? So that's it's just some of the logistics. So that's the conversation you'll have with like a portfolio advisor, right, Greg? They're going to walk you through what's your current property, 123 Main Street. Cool. What do you owe? I owe 50 grand. Cool. What's it worth? Well, it's probably worth X. Okay, cool. If we get a new loan, you're going to get Y out of that property. You're literally taking it out, the equity out, boop, in your pocket, tax-free. Then you can choose to be a good steward about it or not. You can go buy a Porsche. It's up to you, right? But I know you're a good steward, so you're going to reinvest that cap, right? And continue to build your net worth. That's the flywheel, right? And then there's all kinds of cool, crazy things you can, that's just one cash out refi. You can do a whole portfolio loan. You can do it. Sometimes there's home equity lines of credit on investment property. There's all kinds of cool things. And we get into the weeds of financial engineering at its best. We can probably do a whole show on that. Please have me back at some point. I would love to do that, right? But that's just one example, like Greg talked about earlier. He showed you that 16% versus like 8% or 10%, right? That's one example. Same thing here. That's just one way you can pull that equity out. It's the most common way. It's a really good way. I've done it myself. That's how I was able to buy my dad. That Palm Springs retirement house is from JWB rental properties we bought. Couple a year, every year for about 5 years, right? All of a sudden, we're sitting on X in equity. My dad wants to retire. What do we do? Hey, banker, give me some of that equity. Pay off the old loans, get the new loans. They've grown in value. I may go down in cash flow, but I just took out a couple $100,000 for my dad to go retire. Hugely powerful, right? Talk about secrets of the wealthy and how the wealth get wealthier. That's exactly how.